I, 34 male, had been watching wife, 32 female, slowly dismantle our marriage for the better part of a year. It didn't happen overnight. It started with small, persistent demands for space and independence, which eventually morphed into a bizarre living arrangement she forced upon us. She demanded a trial separation, but flat out refused to move out. Instead, she relegated me to the guest bedroom, claiming she needed the primary suite for her mental health. She expected me to continue paying the mortgage, her car lease, and the full balance of her credit cards while she went out drinking 3 nights a week. Her entitlement was staggering. When I suggested we close the joint accounts if we were living separate lives, she threw a massive tantrum in the kitchen, screaming that I was financially abusing her and trying to control her social life. During this time, Friend, 34M, was a constant presence. Friend and I had been buddies since college, and we co-owned a mid-sized logistics company together. He was over at the house constantly, supposedly acting as a mediator for wife and me. I started noticing how they would look at each other, the sudden silence when I walked into a room, the way she would quickly lock her phone screen. When I confronted Friend about it, he acted deeply offended. He told me I was being paranoid, that the stress of the business and the marriage was making me delusional. I didn't argue. I just went quiet. I quietly scheduled a consultation with lawyer, 55M, ruthless family law attorney with a reputation for dismantling entitled spouses. Lawyer gave me strict instructions. Do not move out of the marital home, as it could be construed as abandonment. Quietly gather every tax return, bank statement, and mortgage document. Open a separate checking account at a completely different bank and prepare to transfer exactly 50% of the joint liquid funds the moment we filed. Most importantly, lawyer told me to act completely normal. I played the part of the defeated, clueless husband perfectly. Wife grew bolder. She started openly mocking me to my face, saying I was too weak to ever pull the trigger on a divorce. She told me she was untouchable because we lived in a state where she would get half the business, the house, and permanent alimony since I was the higher earner. Then came the Friday night that changed everything. Wife was heading out to a girls' weekend. She stood by the front door, wearing a dress I had paid for, and told me to make sure the lawn was mowed before she got back. About an hour later, she decided she wanted to twist the knife. She wanted to shatter my confidence completely, to force my hand so I would file for divorce under extreme emotional distress and give her whatever she wanted in a panic. She meant to text my personal cell phone. Instead, she grabbed a business card off the kitchen counter earlier that week, a card I had left out on purpose after crossing out the name and writing emergency contractor on it. She had saved the number in her phone, assuming it was a secondary work line I had been using for a warehouse project. It was lawyer's direct cell. The text went straight to lawyer. It read, "Just slept with your friend. Wanted you to hear it from me. Don't bother waiting up. I want the house." Lawyer, who was sitting at his desk reviewing my file at that exact moment, didn't miss a beat. He replied, "Thanks for the evidence." He called me 3 minutes later and read the text to me over the phone. He already had the divorce petition drafted, citing adultery as the primary fault ground. In our state, proven adultery that leads to the breakdown of the marriage is a complete and total bar to receiving alimony. She had just legally detonated her own safety net. We filed electronically that night. At 8 a.m. the next morning, lawyer submitted an emergency ex parte motion to freeze all marital assets, preventing her from draining the accounts or taking out lines of credit in my name. Wife realized her mistake when she saw the blue check marks on the text and noticed the contact name didn't match my actual secondary number. She tried to unsend the message. She tried to spam the number with follow-up texts claiming it was a joke, a prank, a complete misunderstanding. Lawyer ignored every single one. Monday morning, a process server walked right into wife's office building and handed her the summons and the asset freeze order in front of her entire marketing team. Her court summons literally arrived before she even attempted an apology. She exploded. She left work and drove straight home, bursting through the front door. I was sitting at the dining table drinking coffee. She screamed that I was a coward, that a text message wouldn't hold up in court, that they were just words and I had no physical proof. She demanded I call a lawyer and drop the filing immediately, threatening to ruin my life if I didn't comply. I said absolutely nothing, not a single word, which only infuriated her more. That afternoon, she deployed her first dirty trick. She drove to the county courthouse and filed a petition for a temporary protective order, TPO, falsely alleging that I had threatened her with a weapon when she came home and that she feared for her life. This is a common, highly unethical tactic used to forcibly remove a spouse from the home. An on-duty judge signed the temporary ex parte order based solely on her sworn affidavit. The police arrived at 6 p.m. and forced me to leave my own home. I had to pack a bag while wife stood in the hallway, arms crossed, wearing a smug, victorious grin. She thought she had won. What she didn't know was that lawyer had already anticipated this exact move. The evidentiary hearing for the TPO was scheduled for Thursday. At the hearing, wife stood before the judge and spun a tearful, elaborate story about my supposed violent rage. When it was our turn, lawyer didn't even raise his voice. He handed the judge a flash drive and a printed transcript. He calmly stated that we had the complete Ring doorbell and interior camera footage from the exact time my client allegedly threatened his wife. The judge watched the footage on his monitor. It showed wife kicking the front door open, screaming obscenities for 20 straight minutes, throwing a ceramic mug against the wall, while I sat silently at the table. It completely contradicted her sworn affidavit. Lawyer then submitted the printed screenshot of her text message to him, explaining the motive behind her false allegations. He explained she was trying to gain leverage and force me out of the house after accidentally confessing to infidelity. The judge's face turned to stone. He dismissed the TPO immediately, ordered wife to vacate the marital home by 5 p.m. that evening, and warned her that he was forwarding her false affidavit to the district attorney for potential perjury charges. I moved back into the house that night. Wife was forced to rent a cramped apartment on the bad side of town, her access to my income completely severed by the financial freeze. But the divorce was only half the battle. I still had to deal with friend and the business. The discovery phase of a divorce is exhaustive. Lawyer issued subpoenas for all of friend's bank records, his phone records, and his personal emails, arguing that since he was the paramour, his financial ties to wife were relevant to the marital estate. Friend fought the subpoenas hard. He hired his own attorney and filed motions to quash, claiming his privacy was being violated. The family court judge, already severely annoyed by wife's previous perjury attempt, denied friend's motions and compelled the production of documents. When the boxes of financial records arrived at lawyer's office, we sat down with a forensic accountant. It took them 4 days to find the anomaly. This was the interconnected plot I never saw coming. Friend wasn't just sleeping with wife. He was systematically embezzling money from our logistics company. He had set up a dummy vendor account and was funneling corporate funds into a private offshore LLC. The text messages between wife and friend, obtained through the subpoena, revealed the entire scheme. Wife knew exactly what he was doing. The plan was for her to force a no-fault divorce, demand a massive cash buyout of my remaining business shares, and then run off with friend, who would have already drained the company's operating capital. They intended to leave me completely bankrupt. We scheduled depositions. This is where the legal pressure cooker truly works. We deposed friend first. He sat in the conference room looking incredibly arrogant, wearing a tailored suit paid for with my money. When lawyer started asking standard questions about the affair, friend was dismissive. He claimed it just happened, that I was a negligent husband, and that he was actually doing me a favor. Then lawyer slid a thick manila folder across the table. It contained the wire transfer receipts, the dummy vendor invoices, and the IP logs showing friend logging into the corporate banking portal to authorize the fraudulent payments. Lawyer asked him to explain the transfers to an entity registered in the Cayman Islands, of which he was the sole managing member. Friend's arrogance vanished. His attorney looked at the documents, turned pale, and immediately requested a recess. Friend's entitlement was entirely predicated on the belief that he was smarter than everyone else. When faced with hard documentary evidence of a federal crime, he completely folded. Wife's deposition was the next day. She walked in demanding temporary alimony, complaining that her apartment was uninhabitable and that she was entitled to the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. She still thought she was getting half the business. Lawyer let her talk. He let her detail her financial demands on the record. Then, he presented the text messages between her and friend discussing the embezzlement. He asked her if she was aware that her paramour was stealing from the marital asset she was currently trying to claim a 50% stake in. Wife stared at the paper. She looked at her own attorney, who clearly hadn't been told about the criminal enterprise. Her attorney closed his notepad, leaned back, and realized his client had just admitted to conspiracy on a recorded transcript. The fallout was absolute. We did not keep the evidence to ourselves. My corporate attorney filed a civil suit against friend for breach of fiduciary duty and fraud, simultaneously handing the entire forensic accounting file over to the local district attorney's white-collar crime division. Friend was arrested at his house 3 weeks later. His assets were frozen by the federal government pending the investigation. Because he had used state lines to transfer the funds, it escalated to wire fraud. He is currently awaiting trial, facing up to 10 years in federal prison. He lost his shares in the company, his reputation, and his freedom. Wife's situation was equally disastrous. Once her attorney realized she had lied on her financial affidavits and was implicated in a corporate fraud scheme, he filed a motion to withdraw as her counsel. She was left to represent herself. We went to mediation for the divorce, but it was just a formality. The terms were dictated entirely by us. Because the state recognized her adultery as the cause of the separation, she was legally barred from receiving a single cent of alimony. Furthermore, because she had actively participated in a scheme to devalue a marital asset, the judge heavily penalized her in the equitable distribution. The final decree was a slaughter. I retained 100% of the business and sole ownership of the marital home. She was awarded her car, which she still owed money on, and a fraction of her own retirement account. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees due to her frivolous TPO filing. The day the judge signed the final decree, I walked out of the courthouse and headed toward my truck. I heard footsteps behind me. It was wife. She looked exhausted, her expensive clothes replaced by something cheap. She stopped a few feet away, tears streaming down her face. She tried to apologize. She said she had made a terrible mistake, that friend had manipulated her, that she just wanted to go back to how things used to be before everything got so complicated. She expected me to comfort her. Her entitlement hadn't completely died. She still believed her tears could fix the reality she had created. I looked at her, realizing she didn't miss me at all. She missed the comfort I provided. She missed the house, the credit cards, the stability. I told her the decree was signed and that if she contacted me again, I would have my attorney file for harassment. I got into my truck, started the engine, and drove away, leaving her standing alone in the asphalt parking lot. The peace that followed was hard-earned. Rebuilding the business took time, but without friend draining the accounts, our margins tripled within 6 months. The house is quiet now, no longer a battleground of manipulation and demands. Standing your ground against toxic people requires an immense amount of patience, but letting them engineer their own destruction is the most permanent solution. If you enjoyed watching entitled people legally self-destruct because they couldn't double-check a phone contact, hit that subscribe button before you accidentally text your own confessions to my lawyer.